celestial greetings. I'm Janet Booth, a professional astrologer from West Hartford, Connecticut, and welcome to my program on astrology called Looking Up. The episode today is one you'll want to refer to throughout the new year. It's called 2020 Vision, and we're going to see what the planets are up to and how that might impact you. So first, I'd like to mention that many astrologers have been looking towards 2020 almost with foreboding. And you know, we hate to be the bearer of bad news, and we always say, don't shoot the messenger. But there are some very heavy planetary combinations coming up, and it might be a pretty difficult year. Now, it's not necessarily going to be a recession, but you should prepare as if it might be one, because we've had now 10 years or more of growth since that 2007, 2008 kind of Great Recession, I guess they called it. It wasn't quite the Depression, because we really did a lot to try to bail things out. But usually there's not more than about 7 or 8 years between these downturns, shall we say. And one of the main configurations that the average astrologer is looking at in regards to this is a combination between Saturn and Pluto. Pluto is the planet that's related to economic trends on a sort of global level. It's related to banking, investment, finance, currencies, things like that. It's called the planet of shared resources. And Saturn is considered sort of like the brakes. And, you know, back in the day, before we discovered Pluto in the 1930s, maybe early 30s, Saturn was considered really the bad guy of the zodiac. Well, okay, we had Uranus, and that kind of also added to volatility, unpredictability, etc. So before we had Pluto, which is now considered the planet of death, we had Saturn, and you see that with its beautiful rings right now behind me. And Saturn is depicted by, you know, the old man, and sometimes he's carrying the lantern, or he has an hourglass with him, because Saturn and its sign of Capricorn, that's it's associated with, are both related to time and aging, maturity. Well, with time and aging and maturity, we learn also what are our limitations. We think of it as being sort of putting on the brakes. So if you put together Pluto, the money planet, and the brakes, it says, oh, we're putting the brakes on the money. And they're both traveling through Capricorn, that sign that Saturn rules. And I mentioned maybe it also, sometimes we see depictions of Saturn with the scythe, the sickle, grim reaper. And now that kind of has transferred to Pluto, which is considered the planet of death now, but Saturn used to be. So when you look back through history, some of the large depressions and recessions, there have been important connections between Saturn and Pluto, whether they're across from each other or together. This time they're together. And I hope that what's going to make a difference for us and make it not too bad, but we'll see, is that Jupiter is going to be hanging out with them for 2020 as well. And Jupiter is the planet of expansion, and it's the planet of growth. And there's Jupiter over my shoulder now that I mentioned it. Well, I'm not in control of these pictures, but at any rate, it is kind of a fun coincidence. And Jupiter kind of uplifts things, usually, and it is the planet of international relations. So we might say globally there's definitely going to be a slowdown, but we might find in America that money still exists. It has to park itself somewhere, and we may be, even when we're dipping, more stable than many of the other places in the world, because a lot of crazy stuff is going on. So I still think America is probably pretty good shape. However, you should, like I say, act as if it could be bad, which means as much as you can retire your debt, retire your debt. If you can get it into a lower interest-bearing instrument for your debt, that's even better. Like if you haven't refinanced your house lately, maybe you do that. the more you have a steady, dependable income, the happier you're going to be. And probably take a look at how can you cut back some of your expenditures. You know, maybe you don't need that fancy expensive coffee once or twice a day, or maybe you make it at home and you get a nice thermal mug. I mean, if you start adding up, if you're, you know, a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday worker and you go out to lunch most days, you could save a bunch of money by bringing lunch 3 or 4 days a week. So I'm not here to be Susie Orman, but she would be a good person for you to listen to. So as most astrologers are looking at this sort of heavy-duty combination with Saturn and Pluto and then Jupiter coming into the picture, they're not also looking at a very important sort of monkey wrench that gets thrown in here. And that is from that newly discovered dwarf planet way out past Pluto called Eris, E-R-I-S, named for Mars's sister. And Eris and Pluto are traveling in a 90-degree, we call it square, friction at cross purposes relationship with each other for all of 2020 and into 2021. So it's 5 times that Pluto makes that exact 90 degrees, and 3 of them are in 2020. So I think I might have written that down somewhere. Oh, yes, I did. January 26th. So starting right off the bat, because even though that might be the day it's exact, they're within, you know, a smidge of that for weeks and weeks before and after these exact dates. The second one is June 14th, and the third one is December 10th. So things do get rocking and rolling right off the bat in the new year. And when it's really trickier, I think, is later into the year, because Mars takes about 2 years to go through all the signs of the zodiac. I think that might be Mars behind me now. Hello. And once every 2 years in that cycle, it slows down and it hangs out in one part of the zodiac and does its little backwards dance, the thing called retrograde, optical illusion, but we experience it as very real. And it's going to do that in the sign that it's in charge of, Aries. Mars doesn't get any stronger than when it's in Aries. And that's a go-go sign with a energy, muscle, movement, drive planet. So we're going to be, oh, I want to really get things done. And yet Saturn's going, no, you have to slow down. Or Pluto also in Capricorn, no, you have to slow down. So there was a wonderful acceptance speech at the Tonys this year. And the gentleman said he had 3 pieces of advice. One was, going slowly is the fastest way to get to where you want to be. Now, it sounds like a non sequitur or illogical, but when you think about it, if you make any mistakes while you're rushing, then it's going to cost you more time to make it up in the long run. So it's kind of like do it right the first time, and then you'll be better off with that. So in the process of hanging out for a long time in Aries, Mars is going to get together with his sister, Eris, and they're going to be very close for quite a while. And when we have sometimes a new moon where something else will come into position, so that's going to be Capricorn and Aries. So something comes in from Cancer or Libra, it can make what we call a T-square, and that's very tough. It's usually kind of a turning point and not a whole pile of fun. So we'll talk about this more as we get into the year, and I will have more than just a half an hour to talk about this at a lecture I'm giving next week. And I plan to post that on my website, astrologybooth.com, so you'll be able to hear to a little bit more detail. So we've got some of that Mars and Eris and Pluto mess right around the spring equinox, and that's going to be probably, well, that's a tough season, but guess what else? That's the second toughest season. When I look at the seasonal starting charts, I would give the winner for the toughest season to fall. And that's because we have that T-square added to Saturn and Pluto with Eris and Mars, and Mercury steps into that. And Mercury is always so important about how do we communicate. If we're not communicating well, how do you make progress? and that's during the Mars being backwards too, so that one's kind of tough. The easiest of the seasons in 2020 is going to be winter of 2020 going into 2021. And summer this year, I couldn't say if it's tough or easy. I can just say it's very powerful. We're going to have a new moon eclipse on the summer solstice. And that's usually, big changes coming in, things like that. And it's followed by a full moon eclipse on July 5th. Now there's the eclipse. So that's the USA birthday if you use July 4th, 1776. So big changes are coming in for following 2020, the summer anyway. And I do think because Eris is a lot about feminine, kick butt power. And Mars is also, we'll have to say it's the god of war, but it's fighting, it's striving. I prefer if people and our politicians would say, I advocate for this or I advocate for that. But they always say, I'm fighting for this, I'm fighting for that. And you see what goes on in our country, a lot of fighting. So I do think we're going to see a lot of women who are really out there advocating and fighting when we get into election season. And speaking of election season, do you remember 2000? Oh, who can forget that, with hanging chads and God only knows what messes. So that was Mercury in retrograde at the election. And this year at the election, we also have Mercury finishing its backward jaunt on election day, which means it's at a standstill. And at 2000, doing the similar thing. At that time, it was making one of these squares, 90, to Uranus, the crazy planet. This time, it's going to be making a square to Saturn, which is much more, let's get things straightened out, and we have to take our time to do that. So even though Mars is going to be rushing around in Aries, I think we're probably going to not have our answer right on election night. And I think it'll take a little time again. And isn't that just what we love in America? Using the July 4th, 1776 birth chart for America, which there can be other charts, to me that was like a conception chart. We said, England, hey, guess what? We're out of here. But we weren't a country until we had a ratified constitution and actually till the inauguration of our first president. So those are other charts you can look at. But if you use the 7476 chart, Mercury was retrograde when we were born or when we were conceived. So many times we do the same stupid things over and over again. It's really frustrating. Okay, so we have all this Capricorn stuff, and I want to tell you, Capricorn is very good for being grounded. And we all are going to need grounding more because we're also in a period where sort of floaty, drifty, nebulous Neptune is going through its sign that it rules, Pisces. And we've talked about this before. It's as Pisces as it gets. So that can be confusion, deception, fog, just sort of a sense of adrift. And that's why we need this Capricorn energy to bring us down to earth, to make us slow down and look at what we're doing instead of like rushing through and later going, what was I thinking? Which is a major Mercury retrograde thing. Okay, so we have some difficult times with the Mars messing with Pluto and Eris, and I would say, when some of those? Oh, great. So definitely we've got August around the 13th to the 17th, October around the 4th to the 9th, and then really heavy one right near the winter, winter solstice, the 22nd, 23rd. Now that's when Mars is done backing up, it's coming out, maybe it's going to be not quite so mean. Maybe I need to revise my idea of what's the easiest season. I don't know. Let's just pretend they're all going to have their challenges, because they will. So other things we have going on. Speaking of Neptune, we had in 2018 into 2019, a half square, like 45 degrees, between Neptune and Uranus. So that means it's crazy and confusing. Well, that's officially over, but they're not too far out of that 45-degree relationship with one another, and they come within a degree of it, around, I guess I didn't write that down, but it will be in 2020. Well, probably, maybe for a long time they're within a degree of that, but the tricky point is Mars messes with both of them in early April around the 6th or the 7th. So I expect that to be confusing. Something's coming up with that. Now, Jupiter's doing another better thing than just hanging out with Pluto and Saturn. And we are looking forward, astrologers are looking forward to the Saturn-Jupiter called conjunction when they're at the same degree, and that will be on the winter solstice of 2020. They won't be in Capricorn anymore. They both will have just barely crossed the line into Aquarius. And for me, I've been looking forward to this because Jupiter gets together with Saturn about once every 20 years. It's sort of like a cultural drumbeat for our development. And those conjunctions generally are over 100 years in a particular element. So we've had Earth element dealing with practical matters and money things since the Industrial Revolution, almost, like since the mid-1800s. And then we had finally shifting into air in 1980. It went back for the last time into Earth in 2000, and that was in Taurus, so it's really big about money matters and Jupiter being the international stuff. And geez, well, there's been plenty of stuff going on in that category. And when we start in 2020 in Aquarius, it comes into air for over 100 years. And Aquarius is that sign of the new age because we have these over 2,000 year long great ages. And the age of Aquarius is supposed to be humankind gets together, you know, like that song from the musical Hair, you know, harmony and brotherhood and peace and love and all that sort of, you know, the hippie stuff. But to get to that, there's going to have to be some big changes in our institutions because right now they're very lopsided and geared toward the money and power side, which is very much like Pluto and Capricorn and Saturn there too. And this is why I think once the Jupiter Saturn goes into Aquarius, it's going to be, maybe we start to work towards less of a discrepancy between the top 1 or 2 or 10% and all the rest of the people. So Jupiter, as I was going to say, is going to be 2 signs away from Neptune. And that can have a helpful effect. It's not as strong of a connection as if they're a third of the sky away. This is a 6th, but it's also in the positive variety. And it means if you put some effort in, you get some returns out. And Neptune is a planet about entertainment, arts, things like that. So if you're an artist or an entertainer, 2020 should be a good time for you, maybe particularly around when these sextiles, they're called, the 60-degree connections are exact on 2/20. I like that date, 2/20/2020. Cute, huh? And, I think that adds up to an 8 numerologically, which is the number of money. So do something on that day, maybe, right around then. 7/27, 10/12. Those are the 3 nice times. They get a boost in July from the sun, 12th to the 14th. And around the end of July, Mercury's giving them a boost, and the best day to take advantage of that is going to probably be the 28th of July. So see if you can do something with that. It's also very good for generosity, charities, nonprofits, things like that. Then we have a few times that are a little bit special, like when we have things that are a fifth and 2/5 apart called the quintiles and biquintiles. They're supposed to be lucky or have a talent or magical quality with them. There's a very nice one of those in the May area, the 18th to the 25th-ish. The new moon at the 22nd has that in place. So it's pretty good. Venus is involved with that with Mercury, which is usually the ability to communicate in a very positive or diplomatic fashion. Venus will be retrograde then, and I'll get to that in a moment. And then 30th of November, very good time if you need to do some sort of what we might call repair on your relationship. That's an ideal time. Go away for a little small vacation. There's an asteroid, one of thousands, in a belt out between Mars and Jupiter. And they're mostly named for mythological, maybe the first couple hundred of them that were discovered, and now there's all kinds of proper names. Whoever discovers one with their telescope gets to name something. But one of the major first 4 ones discovered was Juno, and from mythology, Juno was Jupiter's wife. So Juno has a lot to do with marriage matters, maybe also sometimes affairs, because those can impinge on marriage matters. And Juno is going to spend a really long time going through Libra because it has one of its backtracks there. So it's entering Libra on November 3rd of this year, 2019, and it stays there till the 20th of September in 2020. And it will actually be backwards from February 8th to May 26th. So when we see something like that, we're going to have a lot of attention on marriages and affairs and things like that. And when it's not in the backwards mode, there might be a good marriage day in there. I think I had one earmarked for the 27th or 28th of March. I'll have posted on my website soon the 2020 best and worst days, and also a month-by-month file with all of my day ratings. I rate the days 1 at the worst up to 5 at the best. I don't think there's even a 5 in 2020. So 4s are usually as good as it gets. And those will be up as free downloadable PDFs if you're interested in that. So we're going to have also some of these triangles that are called fingers of God, which is, they usually mean something's a little strange, but it ends up leading to something that's pretty good. And there's one of those from Venus to that Jupiter-Neptune sextile. And that's going to be in October. Nope, that's in September, right at the equinox. So we're back to this idea that autumn is probably a time for some adjustments in relationships. Venus and Juno are going to be in a sextile, and they make the connection to Chiron for the finger of God. And Chiron, some people call it in astrology the wounded healer. I usually call it the repairman, but it's a lot about innovation and thinking outside the box. But it does also sometimes expose where the weak links are that need to be shored up. So expect that in relationships, especially around October 7th to the 10th. And, okay, I'll skip that for now. So we have the Mercury retrogrades this year are in water, or water just shifting into the top degrees of air, but still a lot of emphasis on water. And they usually are in the same element, and that's why it might have a couple years with the water element, and then it shifts into the air. We'll have a couple years with air. So this is the beginning of that shift. And when we talk about Mercury, it's our thinking ability, our communications. In water, they're very colored by emotions, and as we move more toward air, there's more logic to it. We did have in 2018, in the summer, where while Mars was retrograde, Mercury was retrograde during that longer Mars period. Well, we're going to have that in 2020 in the fall. So that makes it kind of doubly hard. And we're also going to have Venus going retrograde. That will be May-ish. Let's see. Well, May 13th to June 25th. But when we count the whole time frame of when it goes into the degrees, that it backs up and then comes forward and exits that range again, it goes from 4/9 to 7/29. And during that, near the end of its backup, Mercury starts its retrograde. So there's one icky week from June 18th to June 25th when both Mercury and Venus are retrograde. That is not when you want to start a business, make a major purchase. Might be okay for repairing something, but it's not a really great combination. And that's right around the the solstice, where I told you there's going to be that new moon eclipse. So that is big time of the year. So coming down to the wire here, I did want to talk to you about which signs are going to have the hardest time and which signs are going to have it easier. So you can probably guess, with all the things piling up in Capricorn, because sometimes you get other planets joining Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto there. Pluto's there all year. Jupiter's there, I think, all year. Saturn, oh no, the very end, Jupiter and Saturn get out to Aquarius. But for Capricorns, it's like usual, a lot of hard work. Pace yourself, be disciplined, you're good at that. I'd say the second hardest, it's probably a tie. No, it's not. Aries, the second hardest, because your ruler Mars is there for so long, but going backwards and then hanging out so much with Eris. Not going to be easy. And then the Venus-ruled signs, mostly Libra, because it can make a T-square with the Capricorn and Aries planets, and also Taurus. Taurus is receiving just a 90-degree square. No, Taurus has Uranus passing through Taurus, and the other signs that are in the fixed mode, which would be Scorpio and Aquarius and Leo, will get some action from that Uranus. I would say Leo has the absolute easiest year of any of the signs, and then followed by Virgo, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Gemini. Medium would be Pisces, Cancer, and Aquarius. So, you know, when you're Cancer, you have all these things coming at you across from you from Capricorn, and you're going to have eclipses, and it's the end of the eclipses in Cancer. So we're shifting, those are going into Sag and Gemini. They've been in Cancer and Capricorn for 1.5 years. They won't be back for 8 more years. So, you know, the Virgo people, about all they're getting is the opposition from Neptune. And you know, if you're not in the degree range where those are happening, not going to bother you much. So the last thing I want to mention is all that Capricorn all year long, most of the year, it's going to be cold. Cold. Get a lot of oil in your tank, get some sweaters, hug each other, stay warm, and we'll see you in 2020 on.